Hello everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith. Today I'm going to be showing you Founders of Glomhaven. There's been quite a bunch of talk on this one as it's currently on Kickstarter, and I know there's a bunch of people excited to see the solo play aspect of this. I'm going to be doing my best to run you through a solo playthrough, and we'll see how far through it we can get before the Kickstarter ends. I'm going to do my best, although I have a tight schedule, so I'll be trying my hardest to finish it off. I hope you'll join me as we go through it, and I just want to let you know that, of course, Isaac Childress is the designer of this game, being that Gloomhaven was his monster, a very successful one at that, and this game focuses on a little bit different of a time frame. This is essentially more of a prequel to Gloomhaven's time frame, obviously because Gloomhaven at the beginning of this game doesn't exist. And that's the purpose of this game, is that you're going to sit there and essentially build Gloomhaven from the ground up, which I think is really cool, that he's building a Euro kind of themed game within the world of a dungeon crawler in Gloomhaven. I think that's really cool. It's a good way to kind of tie in both sides of the coin, and I think it's really interesting. So I hope you guys are going to enjoy this, and really this particular video is specific to the solo setup. So I won't be going over any rules in this one. I'll do my best to avoid that. We'll keep the rule talk and the gameplay talk to the actual playthrough. This is just going to be talking about the items kind of out on the table. So before we get going into the playthrough, you kind of understand just at a really high level sense of what you're looking at essentially. So obviously you've got the gigantic map of Gloomhaven here in front of us. You've got water area. Well, we can't obviously build in the water. We've got a beachfront on either side of this particular river flowing through. We've got gray area tiles and stuff like this where we're allowed to put specific types of buildings. We've got kind of a fieldish area in the green, and of course this reddish area over here, which if I'm not mistaken is more of a farmish type area. So we've also got some walls here that are made of stone, so we're not able to actually build anything into this area or even get into this area unless we start here, or we start here and we build something to kind of get over top of it. We do have access to bridges and to gates, so we are able to actually build a way to get out if we want to. But for solo play, you essentially have section, or this is you can start in any of those three areas, but your level of difficulty goes up. So this is the easiest side to start. This is your medium difficulty. This is your hard. So that's a general sense of the map itself. Of course, it has a score track that runs along the outside. I've already got myself a little token way up here, set it at 0, and that's going to change obviously as we go through the playthrough. Over here we've got ourselves a pile of money, which is not mine. This will be the bank's money that I can use, and I'll be spending it and dumping my money into it and taking money out. We've got ourselves some road tiles, so these just signify roads that will be placed on when we want to connect certain buildings. Again, adjacent in this game is everything around a tile, including diagonals, so keep that in mind. We'll talk about that later. What we have here is essentially a whole bunch of buildings. Now these particular buildings are resource-based buildings. So these are going to help you to gain resources, and you can see up in the top right they've got little symbols that are allowing you to potentially get access to a resource as well as potentially points. There's some trickling effect with the points. We'll talk about those later, and there's obviously a major cost involved with actually getting them built and put on the map. So that's a whole bunch of them all set out from 6 all the way down to 4. These right here essentially signify your tier 1 buildings for resources, so you can consider these 4. I guess when I say the word 4, let's clarify. Tier 3 would be this, 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 and this in terms of resource buildings being the most expensive. Tier 2 are costing 4, and tier 1 are right here. Tier 1 gets rate specific with what type of actual resource each building belongs to. So you've got an anvil here, you've got yourself a population type thing here, jewels or gems are right here, there's wood right here, there's some type of food, corn I guess that is right there. So those general are going to be your starting building blocks that you'll be using to then access tier 2, to then access tier 3, and you're kind of building yourself up in stages. So that's the idea. Without getting too deep into it, that's a real good high-level overview of that. These are essentially considered claim tokens. So essentially, when you buy, or not buy something, well, technically you do actually, but when you actually build your whatever it is you're going to put on this map, you'll typically in most cases be putting a claim token on it. And again, that kind of goes into the gameplay, so I won't talk about it too much, but the idea is it's a marker to let you know that you own that particular place, and there's a reason for that, which we'll get into in the playthrough. So that's what those are for. These cubes here are used specifically to note whether or not you've actually gone ahead and delivered a certain substance to a particular location. So later on in the game here, we're going to run into these particular resources, which are going to be placed on the map, you know, and wherever they end up getting built. And you'll notice there's a little square there. So it says we have to get jewels or jewelry, I guess, to that location. This is some type of silk or cloth. And when we do, we can go ahead and put a little token on it saying that's been met, essentially. So that's what those squares are for. Not only are those squares used for that, but they're also used to track your incoming or your income as it goes along and goes up as the game goes on. Because as you increase your city, your income is going to steadily go up based on a number of factors, including houses that are put out and all kinds of other things, which we'll talk about later. So that's essentially those two. This right here, now this, I'll skip talking about this right now because these correlate actually more so to what's going on over here in this particular area of the board. So I'll talk about that in a second and the reason why they're separated out. This right here is just a quick handy building guide that I saw in the prototype. Gives me quick access to see how the tier resources build into each other and then get higher up the scale. So again, you can see what you need in order to get to the higher tiers. It's just a handy reference guide overall at a high level. This right here is the number of coins, of course, that you start with. So in a solo game, you're going to start with 7 coins. So I've gone ahead and put those out, or 7 money. We also start off with 3 gates and 3 bridges. If you see it on doubles, you can only get 3 of them, but they're doubled up, so you can choose how you want to go about using those. You also have over here on your card, which I've chosen the character Savas, or that race I should say, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It says build up to 4 road tiles connected to a stone resource tile. So later on, when we get access to these little guys over here, we're actually able to put them like so and be able to access this particular ability, which allows us to do some cool stuff on the board, and it allows us to do exactly this as long as we meet whatever requirements are stated there. So that's something we'll get into further later, but again, you don't get these guys right off the hop. You need to actually get them on the board by building houses, and that's what these 3 right here are for. You have access to 3 houses, but they need to be built. From what my understanding is that the houses have to be built in each section of Gloomhaven, so you can't have 2 houses in the same area. I believe you have to actually split them up across sections. I may have to double check that because I'm kind of forgetting off the top of my head. But regardless, every time you put a house into play, you actually get access to one of these workers, and one of these workers will allow you access to either use your special ability, or even better, potentially in the future when we talk with these cards, building the really special building or the prestige buildings, you'll notice there's a meeple spot on them to use other special abilities, which will come into play later. Very cool. This one right here, again, is the income track. It just ticks up as you go along. So we'll talk about how that actually works when the gameplay video goes, but it's pretty straightforward. These are more denoted for, and I'll mention what these are for in the solo play. We don't have to focus too much on these in solo play because this is more so in the 2, 3, 4. It tells you what resource you essentially own or start with and which ones you can't touch, essentially. But in a solo play, you actually, and this is the reason I have all 8 of them out, you literally have access to all 8 resources from the start because you're playing alone, so you shouldn't be capped that way, otherwise the game wouldn't work. So it makes perfect sense that you have access to all 8 and you're able to bring them all into the game, so then it becomes your choice as to how and when you do so. So that's essentially that board right there. Now we come over here to what I guess you could consider, and I actually forget the specific name of this board, but really what it is you've got a whole bunch of advisors here on the bottom of this board. These advisors you can go ahead and try to purchase. When they go into your hand as a solo play, they act a little bit differently, and you'd use them a little bit differently than you would in the 2, 3, and 4 player games. I'll show you that when we actually do it, but essentially in quick terms, I guess, if we actually use it for its face-up essential main action, the card is gone. Like, in other words, it's one of those things where if we acquire an advisor, it goes into our hand, which is great because it increases your hand size in the solo play. The downside is if we use it for its top ability or main ability, then the card is discarded from play and it's gone forever. Whereas if we choose a follow action in solo play by flipping it like so, when we play it, we actually get this card back in our hand later, and I'll talk about why and what you can do with follow-up actions when we do actually go through the playthrough. I don't want to do that now because I'll confuse you. So this is all essentially just a bunch of row of advisors. Again, they all have specific actions on them that'll be, you know, things you may or may not be interested in. It'll really depend on how your city is changing over time. You're gonna have to take a look at these abilities and say, is this worthwhile for me to go after? Is it not? That type of thing. Up top here we have, and this is going to be a rotating pile of prestige buildings, is the best way to say it. Typically in the multiplayer game, from my understanding, is you've got these symbols like the red, the yellow, and the square. You can kind of ignore them in the solo play because essentially it's just more so about actually the placement of these particular influence tokens, which are very much unique to the solo game. So what you're seeing here in these 2 tokens is these are considered lasting influence, and they essentially count for 2 influence. So it's a little bit confusing if you don't know the game 100% just yet, but really just think of these. 2 of these are considered lasting, but that also equates itself to essentially 4 fleeting influence. So for every 2 fleeting is considered 1 lasting. So I could have even gone like this, because this equals the exact same amount, but just for the fact of not having a million on the board, I did it like so. And as well, I'm following Isaac's kind of solo playthrough as well. You'll see the difference between lasting and fleeting as we go through the game, because you actually gain those at different times doing different actions, and there is a reason there's a difference. So you'll see that later. One thing you'll notice with these right here is there's a whole bunch of text on them, which I'm not going to explain because this gets more into the deep-rooted mechanics of the game in terms of you know, the resources that are going into them and the delivery of them and all that kind of stuff. We already talked with the abilities, so that's good. The reason there's this little gray peg here is because in solo play, if I decide that this is the one I'm going to build, and again, there's mechanics overall surrounding that and how that's done. But if, say, for instance, I wanted to actually place this Temple of the Great Oak, if I purchase this, you go into your pile to find the Temple of the Great Oak, and you'd be placing it wherever you end up placing it. Again, forgetting restrictions right now because I'm just showing you at a high level. But you'd lay it down like so, and you take that gray token. I'm just putting it there for ease of use so I don't forget. And you basically place a neutral claim token on it. And this is going to come into play as it really ends up being a win-lose condition in the solo play, because if you do not deliver one of these 4 resources to this location in time, bad things happen and you can end up paying influence to try to do so, or you can end up losing the game if you actually can't do it in a certain number of rounds. So it can kind of compile or compound, I guess is a better way to say it. And we'll talk about the winning and losing conditions of the game in another video because I don't want to muddy the waters. But again, what you got here is 3 prestige buildings that can be built. In solo play, the most expensive one that you can purchase is going to be the one sitting with the lasting influence of 2, because it's a fleeting influence of 4. Those are the same things. This costs you the most to get out. This one right here costs you 2 fleeting influence to get out on the board if you want it, and this one's free. So there's a little bit of a balance there in terms of how things come out, and I'll show you how that works. When you purchase one leaves, obviously, things shuffle over and we continue on. But if you decide not to purchase certain ones, they actually start to shuffle down into the areas, or they shuffle into the cheaper areas if I'm not mistaken, and the new ones come in the expensive one, and that gets a little bit iffy. Anyway, that's enough about that. So we've got our decks side by side. So this is our advisor deck that is going to refill our advisors as we pour through them. Same thing with the prestige buildings are off to the side and they will fill this out through. I've got these here just for my own sanity. So I've got like some extra little tokens here that we can use for neutral claim tokens or for whatever when we actually start building out Gloomhaven. Of course, a pile of these gems for lasting influence and for fleeting influence. Again, we already know what these are. These are going to, every single one of these tiles right here, prestige buildings, they're all going to be our main goal in the solo play. And they're all going to be the ones we're trying to deliver things to. We don't need all of them because we won't be able to actually get all of them out on the board in one run anyway. And you'll see why that is in the rules when we talk about that later. But this pile correlates to this deck. So essentially for every one of these tiles right here, there's a card. So essentially if we build a Temple of the Great Oak, you go ahead and find it in here. And it's pretty much color coordinated, so it's easy to find. There's not too much issues there. The only other thing right here is your hand. So at the very beginning of your game, you're playing kind of, I guess in a way, it's kind of, you're almost deck building a little bit. It's really, really light deck building, but it's interesting. So it provides quite a bit of options. So you've got yourself a trade action here. And actually what's happened is this piece should be up here, but I think it's slidden down. So when I start doing the solo playthrough, I'll drag that up. So I apologize for that. It's covering some of things up. This is the only card that's really prototype. These ones are too, but still this one's like cut out. So anyway, this is a trade action. We'll talk about what we can do in that in the next video. The recruit, this is a recruit action. So again, we're going to be doing the main actions in typically every single one of these, because follow we're never going to be doing, because we're never following anybody within the solo play. We're always leading. The only thing you can, when you play follow-up actions, you essentially just flip your card over and play a follow-up action and it gets discarded. Or you could just play face up and say you're doing follow. Either way, you're fine. And then of course, yeah, you always want to play the main in most cases, guys, when you're playing solo, because of the fact typically they're always the most advanced version of the card and they're always better. There'd be no reason to do the follow-up actions because they're actually a lesser. You get less things, like you get no influence gain there, or this one costs one less when you're actually doing this particular construct versus this one. So you're always playing the main action, or you're flipping the card over and doing a follow-up action. Again, we'll talk about those later. But honestly, that's it. That is all of the, we've gone through all the components within the game, and this is kind of the setup. Again, this could totally change in terms of the final copy. This is my arrangement of the solo play, but when Isaac finishes off the rulebook, he may totally change how this actually lays it on the table, and he may even change some of the components of the solo play to maybe making it more intuitive. Who knows? So that's up for him to change as he pleases, but for now, this is essentially the setup. So I hope you guys enjoyed so far. I hope this is a high enough level that it piques your interest and makes you want to know more, but doesn't go so far down into the details that I lost you. So we'll start talking about the rules and what you can do maybe in the very first round or turn. I guess it's considered a round of the next video. So the next video is going to start off right in round one. We'll probably use that entire video for round one just to really get a good understanding of what is going on in terms of the mechanics of the game. And then from then on, if we can pick up the pace a little bit, we'll be doing maybe 2 rounds per video or something like that. We'll see kind of how it falls. But that's pretty much it for the solo setup, guys. So I hope you guys enjoy the playthrough. Give me a thumbs up if you're excited to see more. And don't forget to check out the Kickstarter, because it is currently live as of the release of this video. And I think it's going to be awesome. I honestly do. And I'm a huge fan of Gloomhaven, and the idea that I can sit here and build out a city is something I do not have I don't have a game like this in my collection. So I'll just say that much. And I'm really excited to potentially be adding this to my collection. So hope you guys enjoy it, and I will see you in the next episode. And as always, keep on rolling solo.